everyone, in this video I'm going to look at Rivian stock and answer where I think its value could be 3 years from now in 2027. So I'm going to look at its prospects, its valuation, and a host of other important financial metrics to answer where I think Rivian stock could be in 2027. So let's jump right into it.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.
All right, so one of the things I'm going to need is Rivian's current enterprise value. As of this recording, it's at 5.45 billion, down massively from the over 140 billion it was trading at in late 2021. You can see just how much of a frenzy in EV stocks there was in 2021. Way ahead of any of the company's reported revenue, sales, profitability, or cash flow. Investors just got a little bit too excited. Well, I shouldn't say a little bit. I should say they got way too excited about EV stocks. And even today, I think the enthusiasm for EV stocks is overdone. I don't think this industry is going to be very lucrative for investors in the long term. Although the industry is going to grow, I think more and more vehicles will be electric vehicles going forward. But even still, that doesn't mean that the companies that make these electric vehicles are going to be profitable, or are they going to be good investments? Because many of these companies, like Rivian, are losing significant sums of money on the bottom line. And car companies overall have not been the most profitable over the last few decades. There's no reason why electric vehicles should be any more profitable than internal combustion engine vehicles have been over the last few decades. The industry is riddled with massive capital investments. It takes a lot of capital, billions of dollars, as you're noticing, from Rivian and others to make these manufacturing facilities, spend money on research and development to create these models, and then inventory. And then every few years, you've got to update because your competitors are updating. It's a fiercely competitive industry, all of which leads to very skinny profit margins, especially in relation to the massive sums of capital required for the industry. So I've been saying this for several years now, since 2021, since these stocks started to explode. I've been warning investors to avoid the EV industry overall. It's reasons I suggested earlier. Nevertheless, if you're interested in Rivian stock and you're looking at where it could be in a couple of years, we will look at that prediction here. One of the items I need is that enterprise value. The next thing I need is the EV to revenue. It's currently trading at an EV to revenue of 1.23. I'm going to need this number. I also need the expectations for where Rivian's revenue could be a couple of years from now. So in 2023, revenue is expected to come in at 4.8 billion, which expectations indicate revenue growth of 9% year over year. I think that's overly optimistic because Rivian itself says that it's going to deliver 57,000 vehicles for 2024, which is the same amount of vehicles it delivered in 2023. And these vehicles are going to come at lower prices because Rivian has cut prices. So you're going to produce the same amount of vehicles at lower prices. I don't see where the revenue growth is going to come from. I think Wall Street was expecting Rivian to outperform this guidance, and so far in the first quarter, it didn't do so, right? In the March update for the first quarter deliveries, it came in at 13,980 vehicles produced. So that's a little bit behind the 57,000 pace. It's at 56,000 if you annualize that number. So they're not ahead of schedule, and they didn't update and upgrade their guidance. They reaffirmed the guidance for the same number of units year over year. And if that remains the case, the company's not going to grow revenue. Revenue growth is either going to be flat or down slightly, given that the average selling prices are likely to be lower after the price cutting. They started one round. I wouldn't be surprised if there's further price cuts in Rivian's future for 2024, given the competitive fierceness in the industry, given all the price cutting from everyone else, from Rivian, Ford, GM, Tesla, to nearly every provider in the industry. There's price cutting, and so I don't think Rivian's going to be able to avoid that price war in 2024. All right, so now that we've got the numbers, we can begin our prediction model. So 2025 revenue was expected to come in at 7.48 billion. I got that number here from Yahoo Finance. The analysts on Wall Street that are following Rivian stock, they think it's going to deliver 7.48 billion in revenue in 2025, which would mean that its revenue is jumping by 54.8% in 2025 up from 2024. Again, I think these predictions from Wall Street are too optimistic. I'm going to revise them lower given all the macroeconomic factors, given the industry factors in the electric vehicles. I'm going to downgrade that forecast. And I'm actually going to use a 25% revenue growth rate, which again is, I think, being optimistic with Rivian's revenue. But going from 2025 to 2028, which is the period I'm forecasting, Rivian is likely to launch its lower priced model, which could be a catalyst to boost revenue growth. That could be a reason to boost revenue, not in 2024, probably not in 2025, but likely starting 2026 and 2027 and 2028, its revenues will get a boost from those lower priced models. How much of a boost? Well, I'm estimating a 25% revenue boost from those lower priced models. Because again, the industry, the company, remember, Rivian is losing massive sums of money on the bottom line selling these higher average selling price models. I can't imagine how much money it's going to lose when it sells these lower priced models. So that's something to keep in mind. Can they continue with these massive losses on the bottom line? Or is that lower priced model also going to be more profitable for Rivian? That remains to be seen, but it seems unlikely. In 2028, I'm forecasting, given this 25% revenue growth rate, that Rivian delivers 22.8 billion in revenue in 2028. So they should say 2028 revenue up here. I'm going to update this on the fly. And what we have here is 2028 revenue estimated at 22.8 billion. And if I maintain this 1.23 EV to revenue valuation, Rivian's market value or enterprise value could increase to 28 billion in 3 years. That would be up from the current valuation of 5.4 billion, or a nearly 5x increase from today. I would mention right now that I don't think this scenario is very likely. I think this is the more unlikely scenario out of the 4 scenarios I've modeled here. If the EV to revenue were to decrease to 1, valuation would still increase by nearly 4x to 22.8 billion, another scenario that I feel is unlikely. If the EV to revenue was to fall to 0.75, valuation could increase to 17 billion, or nearly 3x where it is today. Less likely, but more so than the other ones. And then finally, if the EV to revenue were to fall to 0.5, more in line with legacy automakers, the valuation could increase to $11.4 billion in 2027. This is the scenario out of all these 4 that I think is the most probable out of these 4 scenarios, a roughly doubling of its valuation in 3 years. If the company does indeed achieve that 25% growth rate over these next several years, which I think is also a risky proposition. It could deliver growth above 25% if these lower priced models turn out to be more popular than I'm estimating. Or it could be even worse than 25%. So the range in which these outcomes could come in for Rivian are very wide. They're very wide. Now, I've chosen 25% here as a estimate based on going off of their lower priced models and their current capacity where they can produce, right? Because 57,000 units is what they're going to produce this year. They have the capacity, the manufacturing capacity today to produce around 200,000 units. So they could increase production by 25% per year for the next several years and still not reach their limit for where they can produce, right? But if they were to produce growth at 50% per year, they would hit that ceiling for where their manufacturing capacity is right now. And remember, they paused construction on the Georgia facility to expand production capacity. I don't know if they're going to want to spend those billions of dollars that's required to expand manufacturing capacity with the industry being in the position that it's in right now. So those are some of the factors I'm considering when estimating the 25% growth rate. So where do I think Rivian stock is most likely to end up in 2027 or 3 years from now? The enterprise value, I would say somewhere on the lower end of these estimates. I would say somewhere between 9.5 billion and 11.5 billion in valuation for 2023. So between 9.5, I should write it like this, 9.5 and 11.5 billion in enterprise value for 2027. And the wider than usual price estimate is because the company itself is more volatile than usual. There's a lot more uncertainty with Rivian stock than most of the stocks that I'm following because of the direction that the company can go, because of the volatile nature of the EV industry, the fierce competitive pressure, the fact that the company paused its increase in manufacturing capacity, the fact that it still has some manufacturing capacity it could grow into. All of those factors tend to play a huge role in why I've given a wider than expected estimate here for Rivian and where its enterprise value could be in 2027. But remember, that estimate that I'm giving, 9.5 billion to 11.5 billion, would still be higher, roughly double where it is today. Roughly double where it is today. So even though I don't think the risk versus reward is worthwhile, I still think that over the next 3 years, Rivian's value is likely to be higher than where it is today. Before I let you go, let me tell you about the greatest deal on YouTube. With just a click of a button, you can get free financial analysis from a professor with decades of investing experience. So what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you again soon.